Good afternoon. How are you? We're doing a sit and talk today because it started to rain and that cramps my style. So we're doing this indoors. And what we're going to talk about, I think, which makes the most sense to me, is about the Pope. Pope Francis died, I think, 7 a.m. or 7:30 a.m. Um, and the public's been mourning since. I don't look at him so much as a religious leader, though he is certainly that with more than 1 billion Roman Catholics as part of his church. And I say of his church because he presides over it and he's responsible for it. In that role, he has done more to shake up the church, probably since John the 23rd, when I was too young to appreciate what he was doing, but he had a Vatican Council, first one summoned since 1800 something. And it, if you will, let fresh air into the church. It addressed the things that concerned people. And John the 23rd was, but just very attractive to people because he was so genuine and he was transparent to the better person he was among the challenges he faced. This Pope comes from the same cloth, it seems to me, different background and so forth. He's a Franciscan. St. Francis, for those who don't follow these things, was immersed in dread about the poor and the downtrodden. He also was thought well of because of his affection for animals. I had a real world experience with a Franciscan priest, Father John. How appropriate, we were both John. And I had written an article about a friend of mine who had created a cross for a local church. And he had carved out a way in the church for, if you will, the sun god to come through it. It's a very powerful project he put together. And I wrote about the other things he did, horses and a whole variety of things. Father John and I then had a conversation. And I said to him, am I supposed to help you or are you supposed to help me? Because he called to talk about my article. And then we would go on walks, not unlike what I do on days when it's not raining. And we would talk about the church and faith. And I never made any reservations about who I was. But he was a man who, as a boy, was poor. And I believe he was in Ravenna, which is a place with some beautiful art objects. But his family didn't know anything about that. And one Sunday, the local priest with a pickup truck said to a bunch of boys who were standing there after Mass, if you come, I will give you an education, but you have to agree to join the priesthood. And so John did that. Father John did that. And when we walked, he wore this leather hat. He was dignified in appearance, but there was nothing reserved about him. And he would get upset when the day so filled him with the day's events that there wasn't room in him to pray. And I told him I meditated. He said he prayed. And we never did it together, but that was our differences. And so I had a great deal of respect for him and always for the Franciscans. And so when I heard, as many feel the same way, that our Pope would be named Francis, that was exciting because if he lived up to the Franciscan ideals, it would be an important revolution to an important worldwide organization of what it believed and how it could help the world. And I confess that I was much more interested in the realpolitik, the part of the church's mission that could make a difference if they were giving them the golden rule, if they were pushing them forward. Now, there are plenty of things I disagree with the church about. There are examples of people who, to my way of thinking, got over the top about him. I mean, even today, Marjorie Taylor Greene says, this is her take on the death, evil is being defeated by the hand of God. It's an amazing statement that a person not of a tender age, not angry, on a day that somebody has died, that you would say such a thing. But he didn't deserve this. He did what he could in a church that resisted him. And some may disagree with this, but it was clear across the world that he was busy persuading some people to do what was right about gays, about not discriminating against others, about embracing others, no matter what their belief system, his views against war, his concerns about those who were refugees. Now, he had a special interest in this because his family escaped to South America, I believe from Italy. And so he knew it up close and personal. And he cared about the poor in South America. And this carried him as almost the profile of a local parish priest, except one who had an enormous ability to understand and feel what the world needed, in my opinion, separate and apart from his religious function. So what do we have now? It is interesting that he decided to ignore his doctors and spend the week, the Holy Week, risking his life. And we can imagine, although I don't know that it's written now, and we may find out in the weeks ahead as these things do happen, that he knew he was so weak from the terrible illness that he had that this might be his last. And so I think he decided that he was going to embrace this and survive or not, but he was going to do it. And so he had the opportunity to deliver an address on Sunday, Easter Sunday. And it's a significant address, and it is one he gave every year on Easter Sunday, obviously attuned to what were the demands at the time. And I'm just looking up Urbi et Orbi. It's to the city and to the world, Latin. The address he gave today was in the shadows of a world that has wars that we might argue should have long stopped, crimes against people that should not be tolerated, efforts to defeat peace. We see that in our own country. And also pushing refugees around, like the Pope once was. And he has said that he will meet with anyone. And I believe that that's true. Now, I have some notes from his speech, and I thought they would be a worthy way to reflect upon the value of this Pope. He says in his speech on Sunday that had to be delivered by another holy man, if you will, how much contempt is stirred up at times toward the vulnerable, the marginalized, and migrants. Now, what is that addressed to? That's addressed to us. Now, yes, he may be moved by the values he holds as a blessed man, but he's talking straight, powerful politics when he's saying, if not politics, this should be the ethics of the world. This should be who we are and what we do. He then appealed. He said, I appeal to all those in positions of political responsibility in our world not to yield to the logic of fear, which only leads to isolation from others, but rather to use the resources available to help the needy, to fight hunger, and to encourage initiatives that promote development. These are the weapons of peace, instead of sowing seeds of death. This is a direct address to America, to who we are as Trump would have us, while you and I resist what Trump would prefer. The contretemps, if you will, between Vice President Vance and the Pope Francis was a powerful disagreement. Pope Francis, the Conference of Catholic Bishops, okay, that's a Catholic organization. He rebuked their response to his and Trump's policies on migrants, and acknowledging that he and the Pope diverged on this issue. Okay, let me make it clear. This is Vance's position, disagreeing about how we should handle migrants. Now, the Pope wouldn't hear anything of it, but he does not personalize. Can you imagine the tolerance and patience for him to accept and meet someone? And for those who want to look for some passage that suggests this, think of Jesus in the garden before they take him away to torture and kill him. When they're awakened, Peter, upon this rock shall we build this church, leading to Francis by their religion, the soldiers come, and Peter takes a sword and cuts one and takes his ear off. Ironic, don't you think? And what does Jesus say in response? He says, no, don't fight. And he puts the ear back on. You and I can diverge about these miracles as symbols or metaphors or whatever they are. But it's making a statement that parallels the Sermon on the Mount, which he says, turn the cheek. In other words, don't fight, turn the cheek. And so you can see that it's an alien world to deal with Vance and Trump and that contemplation. And one of the reasons I think it's worth talking about these things now, other than the solemn, honestly stated praise of the man, which I am doing, but in my own way, this is an opportunity to consider what he was trying to do and what he was doing, which was worthy of us all, and what that legacy is for us as part of our resistance to the backward and hateful approach taken by the ogre in the West Wing. Now, the Pope is fundamentally a person who cares about the flock of Christians under his leadership. He misses the point. It's not just those, quote, under his leadership. This is not for him a way to organize a vote for himself, because he says things that upset people because he believes they're true and right, like with gays, like an enlarged view for women, about fighting the terrible thing that has caused many to leave the church, having to do with the predatory aspects of some clergy toward children in their trust. So, whatever reason, and it probably has to do with the numbers at the polling places, Vice President J.D. Vance wanted to go to Rome because he hoped to build fences that would fall down before a unity between Vance and the Pope. Now, Vance chose to become a Catholic. In my experience, I had a similar feeling about bringing Republicans into the Democratic Committee. I always seem to have to go back and work with that a little bit more, because they didn't always leave the Republican Party to take into heart both the Democratic approach at its best and its policies at its best. So it is safe to say that as the Pope died, there was a wide gap between this Vatican and the Trump administration. On this weekend, the National Catholic Reporter commented on a tweet sent out by Vance. And it was described as a tone-deaf Good Friday tweet. See, these guys, they can't change their approach, even when they're dealing with something as magnificent as a world effort at peace and bringing the world to a place where it really is like a garden that anyone can join and enjoy. And that is not Trump, not the Vice President Vance. None of these people. They're hateful. So he said, this is his tweet, the Trump administration is working to preserve U.S. sovereignty by curbing illegal immigration. We support legal pathways to citizenship. That's not the point. It isn't about that. Now, there are a couple of things that are interesting to consider here. Vance has this idea from the medieval times of a thing called Ordo Amoris, which is, well, a pecking order of Christian care. So it's like a surgeon, choosing to help and not help others. Now you can see right away that this is not how Francis approaches, or Pope Francis approached this thing. And you may have remembered hearing him say something like, oh, we should do Ordo Amoris. Why do we care about such deportations? Why does that matter? And so in this pecking order of Christian care, we have the family is first, followed by neighbors, the community, fellow citizens, and lastly, those beyond. Migrants, the poor, persons of color, people with asexual dissonance in their background as perceived by Trump and his people. There's the division. And when you think about it, it's hard to understand why any religion could possibly, that says in its scripture what it's supposed to do, could embrace a man like Trump. Satan. Really. So what is the Pope's reaction to this order? And he said, the true Ordo Amoris that must be promoted is that which we discover by meditating constantly on the parable of the Good Samaritan. We extend ourselves for others. We help others. Oh, sure, they may be in the family, in the community, in any number of places. Garcia is an example of what a person observes and decides, I'm going to be a good Samaritan, but not this administration. I'm actually talking more about the administration than I want to, but sometimes the base relief between what is profound about one person, Pope Francis, and dismal and dystopic about another is obvious when you can see the shadow as compared to the light of the way that we should follow. So, the political side says they're going to seize a rapport between each other. And the thing is that the migrant crackdown in the United States runs against the Pope's efforts to embrace in every way he can humility and mercy. And that's because as a Franciscan, he believes that. And as a Jesuit, keep in mind, the Jesuits were outlawed for becoming Pope because of misadventures, if you will, in the Inquisition. But this man became so honored by others in his advanced years, which is actually a job requirement for those who normally think of ageism as a reason not to have somebody. But I guess it was in his 70s, and I think he's held the position for 13 years. And instead of living in the, quote, palace, and I don't mean this in a discouraging fashion to say this, he stayed elsewhere as the Pope. He assumed whatever symbolism and actual feeling he could to do the best as the Pope to appear to be the poor man that Franciscans prefer, choose to help, and to appear as they are. So we have a situation, therefore, where we have a tone-deaf vice president go there and try to manipulate the conversation to say, oh, what the church is doing just doesn't matter. That's not acceptable. One opinion was that Vance is here to break through the enmity. The enmity is not based on some personal characteristic of Pope Francis. It is based on a value that supposedly Vance embraced as a member of the church, that he disputes Pope Francis should lead as he has. That's a powerful statement. So, the Pope has asked for ceasefires, hasn't happened. Asked for peace in Gaza and with Israel, hasn't happened. Asked for the same in the Ukraine, hasn't happened. Is concerned about the loss of relief from our agencies, because the Roman Catholic Church depends upon some of this relief to help the poor, to help those who are refugees. So you see, there's no companionable way for the Trump administration to implement Pope Francis's concerns. What's the problem with that? There's no problem. We should be resisting the president because he does not embrace the values that made this nation what it was and can be again once we rid the entire church, rid the government of him and his incompetent fools. So that's the lesson here, is that a wonderful man who did what he could, resisting others who did not care for his leadership, for peace, for dealing with the poor. And what could be a more successful way to spend a life than to help others, as Pope Francis did, first in South America, through the church, and finally as its Pope. So what's the next question? The next question is, will the resistance within the cardinals mean that we're going to lose our track, as I believe happened after Pope John the 23rd? And, or are we going to sustain his initiative and present a worldwide counterforce for peace and charity for all? So that's what I got today. And I'll look forward to reading your comments. And depending on the weather tomorrow, I may be out on the trail. Thank you very much. Ite in pace, in Latin for go in peace. I remember thinking, as many others my age, when we were kids and we studied the Mass in Latin, that the beauty of it was you could go anywhere and they would say the church and say the Mass in the same way. And there's a value in the world treating each other the same way, however they say it. Put the Tower of Babel aside. The question is, how do we relate? How do we help each other? And I've mentioned James Baldwin before, since a lot of this is about discrimination, how a person looks, are they persons of color? And he used to say, look at my face. That's the only difference between us. In his case, my face is black, but everything else about me is the same things that you want for yourself and your people. That's what Pope Francis was. There is no such comparable blessing from the White House or anybody in this crazy cabinet they put together of incompetence and werewolves. So until tomorrow, bye-bye.